Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. How are you? Okay, that was really weak. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. How are you? All right. Awesome. My name is Michelle Lee. I am a journalist based in St. Louis. I'm also the co-founder of the Very Asian Foundation. Thanks. Where's Suji Hong? She's our executive director. Just want to say hi to Suji. We are so proud to be partners at TAAF, with TAAF. We work with them throughout the year, just really appreciate all the hard work that our group and TAAF does to support creators and also in this influential and very important space of children's literature. So before we actually start this panel, I want to start with some readers, some friends of ours who are going to be reading excerpts from books from our authors.
I have eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea. My eyes are just like Mama's. Mama's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea crinkle in the crescent moons when she comes home from work. She scoops me in her arms, even eyes sparkling like starlight, and tickles me until we laugh ourselves onto the floor.
Anjali asked, is there any more plates somewhere else? Sorry, kid, the cashier grumbled.
Can you please check?
What's your name?
Anjali.
Huh? Spell it.
Anjali.
The cashier chuckled and tossed the plate in front of Anjali.
Anjali suddenly heard one of the older boys, Zachary, snickering. They're not going to have a plate for someone like you, Anjali. Anjali's face got hot.
Thank you. Can we give a big round of applause for Avery, Ember, and Maven? Thanks, guys. That's so cute. They're the stars of the show, really, aren't they? So, as you heard, there is undeniable power in the pages of a book. Characters with names and family traditions they recognize, along with shared experiences and also histories. So, when you see pieces of yourself, you feel like you belong. And I think it's such an important lesson for our youngest readers, as you two know. Would you mind introducing yourself to everyone? Thanks for being here, by the way.
Yeah. Go first. Sure. Hi, I am Sheetal Sheth. I think of myself as a storyteller because I do it in lots of different ways. I'm an actress, I'm a producer, author, and I love kind of centering stories that have been traditionally marginalized for far too long.
I'm Joanna Ho. I am an educator. I worked in high schools as an administrator and a teacher. I'm also a children's book author, so I write picture books, young adult novels. The excerpt that was read was from my first book, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. And I also try to center stories. My stories center and highlight, I think, again, very similarly, stories that have been marginalized, made invisible, erased, to showcase really the power that we have in our communities and to hopefully help us to raise our voices and speak out for change.
Yeah. Did you set out having a specific impact when you wrote your books?
I think for me, I became a children's book author when I became a mom. So I didn't grow up always wanting to be an author. I think there's some people who really want to write their whole lives. And I have always been very centered in the work of equity and social justice and liberation. And that's why I became an educator. When I became a mom, I was looking for books for my son. And that's when I started to understand the depth of invisibility and erasure of people like us, of all marginalized communities within children's literature. And that was a huge catalyst for my journey into writing. So I think for me, there is a purpose, and the purpose is to add just one more voice in this rising tide and a growing and changing canon of literature that helps us to see the world as it should always have been seen, to help us really highlight the stories of who we really are as a people, as Asians in America, but also to hopefully help uplift other voices from other communities as well.
What about you?
Yeah, very similar. I have also worked with kids my whole life. Since I was 5 years old, I've either been, I know it sounds crazy, but either mentoring or working in some group because it's so dear to my heart. But it was interesting when I got older and started looking at the children's spectrum of books, also when I had kids, I saw the same narrative when it came to South Asian-led stories, and I was like, do they know that we don't just celebrate Diwali all day? I'm like, we also play sports and have dinner with our parents and go to school. And so for me, it was very much about centering slice of life stories that wasn't about like teaching people about our culture or trying to kind of make sense of why we exist, and really kind of normalizing everything that everybody has and realize how much more we have in common than anything. And so for me, when I started writing the Anjali stories, thankfully they did well and I was able to make more. And then I found out that this is the very first picture book series that ever had an Indian American at the center of it.
Wow.
Which was shocking, but not surprising.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm just happy that I get to make more of them, again, centering just slice of life stories.
Yeah. What kind of lessons do you hope also kids or parents or teachers take away from your books?
I mean, for me, it's very much about knowing that you're perfect exactly the way you are. And I think that resonates in all of our books, which is why, you know, I think we write them. I'm tired. I mean, my first book, Always Anjali, which you heard, by the way, those were my kids reading it, were very much based on my life's like stories that have happened to me. When I started acting, I was told to change my name. I lost jobs because I wouldn't. I have many stories of just these microaggressions that I was dealing with when I started acting in the 90s when brown was not cool. And so I kind of channeled all that into it because when I was working with kids older, I noticed that there were so many kids feeling the same way still. And I would hear the nicknames that the kids would give each other. And I'm like, do you like that? Don't you want to be called by that beautiful name your parents gave you? And so all of my books are very much based on real life stories that I have kind of made into kid talk.
And for me, I feel like I tend to explore a lot of issues of social justice in my books. So even in like an Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, there's a page that says, you know, my eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea are a revolution. And I really use that word intentionally. My hope is that in the stories that we tell, we can start to explore more deeply, especially layers of history that we have lived, that the people whose shoulders we stand on have gone through, that we don't know. And I think it's so important for us to understand those layers of history because we understand much better who we are, who we've been, and the possibilities that we have as a community and as individuals. And so my desire in the books that I write, whether they're slice of life stories or whether they tackle issues of racism, anti-Asian racism, or solidarity, that we start to understand how connected we are, how powerful we are, and that hopefully as you read books that I write, but books that all of us are writing or the work that we're all doing, we generally start to understand the voice that we have in the world. We start to look at the world with a much more critical consciousness, with deeper compassion, but also with a greater drive to create change and to use our voices and our power.
But I am just curious how things have changed politically from when you started writing your books to today. You know, I just said I'm from St. Louis. If you're from St. Louis, you say that's much different than saying you're from Missouri, because those two are different, you know, in terms of how you perceive St. Louis or Missouri. And so, and no offense to any of them, but the reason I say that is because Missouri libraries are under fire in public schools. We also know something like 30% of banned books deal with race, racism, or feature characters of color. And so I know that there have probably been some challenges, right? And will you share those challenges that you may have faced and how you have overcome them?
Sure. I can start by saying, you know, I really, as an author, my career stands on the shoulders of many authors who've come before. So you might have heard of We Need Diverse Books is an organization and a nonprofit that has started within the children's publishing industry to really advocate for an inclusivity in our literature. And that is led currently by an Asian woman named Ellen Oh. And it's because of that movement that started 10 years ago that publishers started to pay attention and started to, you know, try to be more intentional about adding more inclusivity into their books. And so I'm really aware that my career really genuinely, like right immediately, is on the shoulders and the backs of people who have come before doing that work. And what you're talking about in terms of book banning, I think my books are coming out at the time that book banning was happening because it is a very clear response to our push to be seen and to be heard and to have our stories told. There are very clear systems and clear demographics that want to maintain power in particular ways. And to do that, they need to silence our stories. And so for me, you know, I am also on the national leadership team for the Authors Against Book Banning. I think you would be horrified to see and understand how deep and how widespread the book banning is. It's in every state. There are things like in Idaho, there's a law that just got passed, or is in the works, where you can collect a bounty for finding a book in a library that you find offensive or harmful according to any standards. There's laws where teachers and librarians can be criminalized for teaching books like ours in their schools. So for me, you know, I have had some books in collections that have been banned in states, but there are certainly, it's like a very clear playlist of books that they're selecting.
Can you explain what that means for people who might not know what the collection of bans looks like?
Oh, sure. So, well, we could talk about book banning for a long time. For me, there's an organization called The Conscious Kid. They distribute inclusive books to schools around the country. My Isaac Kiss in the Corners was included in this collection, and there was a school board who decided not to allow the collection in their schools. It's just, you know, books by authors of color, and they didn't let them into schools because they were too offensive or divisive or political.
Sheetal, have you?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything Joanna said. I will just add, I think that there's, like she said, there is no accident that there was like a tiny like opening of a door for a period of time. And I think we all feel like that is slowly closing. And I think what we need is more people to be louder, because I think the problem is there is a minority that's really loud. Yeah. But they are not the majority, you know? I mean, I know, I'm sure Joanna has, like I get so many messages daily from librarians, teachers, parents saying, what can I do, what can I do? And it's really like you have to go to the things and show up, because all the other people are going there and being louder and making these things happen when the communities don't believe that way. I mean, I had a school visit last fall where when I went there, and I was told it might get canceled. It didn't get canceled, and when I went there, the principal came up to me afterwards and said, man, this was a rough few weeks. And I said, what happened? And she said, you know, I realize this is when I need to do my job. She's like, I could have just like cowered and leaned into just whatever the nonsense was, but she's like, this is where I earn my keep. And I was like, I'm so grateful for you, because we need more of that. Yeah. And so I think it's about, I mean, it's so ridiculous, really. And I don't think we should be spending our time on this by any means. There's some worthy debates to be had, but not this. Yeah. And at the end of it, it's because I will tell you this, the kids, when they get these books, are making connections and being seen in ways that they never have. Right. And that's what they're losing out on.
And I've seen that firsthand too, because the Very Asian Foundation buys your books, both of your books, and sends them to schools all across the country. We give them a list of like 250 books, and we say, choose what works for you, because we want this to be about choice and celebration, but they always choose your books. And you know, you would think in Missouri, for example, where there have been lots of book bans, all of the schools that we've worked with have 100% accepted books. The only school that we had trouble with was actually Los Angeles, which I thought was interesting. So it might surprise some people in here, you know, to hear that.
I had a preschool class. I asked them, you know, depending on the age, I asked like what they know about authors and writing, and it was 4-year-olds, and I said, what do you guys think authors do? And collectively, they were like, change the world. Oh. These were like 4-year-olds in Georgia, and I was like, I don't think I need to be here. You guys are doing just fine, but like that's how much it means to them.
Yeah. And I do want to say something, because you were at a school today reading books. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's so powerful. I mean, it was really special to be in a school. We were reading our newest book, Amanda and I. And
where's Amanda?
Amanda, right here. If you don't know Amanda Pongbodapakia, she is an artist, and we'll share a little bit about her book in a second, but she is an artist that is really showing our community in ways I don't think we've seen it before, with just such strength and power. I mean, you've seen her art for sure around the country, but we got to read to a school that was in Chinatown today, and there's something so powerful about getting to share our stories and to talk about our history and about our power inside our communities and across diverse communities. There is just stories, truly, like everything we do is stories, like whether it's advertisement or teaching or cooking or dancing or, you know, whatever, it's all stories, and that is what I think moves our hearts and shifts our mindsets in a space that allows us to move forward to create change.
Can we talk about your new book too?
Yes,
because it's really an anthem for Asian America. And I'm wondering if you're concerned that it could be politicized. You are, okay.
Oh, absolutely. This book, I researched this book for a year before we wrote it, and went through many stages. So first of anger at understanding how invisible our history has been. We never learn anything about ourselves in schools, in history, in movies, in texts. It's not part of the common understanding of history at all. So understanding the levels of injustice and oppression that have been enacted upon our diverse communities here in our ancestral homelands was really just devastating for me. It was also full of grief and wondering like where we could have been if we had all collectively understood this history, how we might move differently in solidarity if we knew how we'd always moved that way before. And then finally, an understanding that we've always risen up, we've always spoken out, we've always fought back against injustice to create spaces of safety and empowerment for ourselves. And that's just not a narrative that we hear about Asians at all. We're submissive, we're quiet, and that's not true, historically, factually untrue. And so that's really, I think, the spirit we tried to capture in our book, and Amanda's art is just stunning and gorgeous. So I think we can share a couple pages from it.
Would you mind reading an excerpt?
Yeah, sorry, my...
Do you want to take a drink of water? I can ask Sheetal
Sorry.
about
Go
the
ahead.
nonprofit.
Perfect, let's do that.
Okay. It was really fun, though, to go to the school in Chinatown today. The kids were so excited. And I think the most important thing is when you read a book, it doesn't matter what the background is of the person, what they look like. I mean, it's really about seeing the windows and the mirrors and the sliding glass doors. And so it's just so powerful when we can all come together through literature. Okay.
I think the slides, I'm not sure who's switching the slides. Oh yeah, perfect.
You know what?
I got
this
it.
if you want.
Perfect, okay. This is just a few pages from the book. When they came for that which was not theirs, sowing toxic flowers that bloomed in midair, we held their injustice in our mouths. We came in shackles on ships. We came swindled into servitude. We came clutching ideas and aspirations. We are the history of this land. We who stand in solidarity understand the vines of freedom must climb arbors of cooperation to bear fruits of liberation. We work together on the line, shielding each other with our fists and our fury, claiming space for our stories and dreams. We who shine have the power to define the legacies we leave. The truths we speak today pin themselves to the heavens in constellations that will guide the seekers of tomorrow. We who prosper hold injustice in our mouths, encircle it with tenacity and audacity, roll it around on our tongues, and spit it out.
How does it feel for you to read that out loud?
Oh, it feels, it feels amazing to be able to share the story in the work. Amanda and I have been working for years on this story really collaboratively, and I think that it's one thing to have the words that I've written, it's another thing to see them on the backdrop of this incredibly powerful, dynamic art that Amanda created for the book, but that she just embodies, in her life too. She's right here, everyone.
It's a true partnership. That's what I love. It's always the author, the illustrator. Sheetal, can you talk about the nonprofit Love for Reading? Can you talk about why it's important to you and what it's about?
Yes, I co-founded it with two other people. It's called For the Love of Reading. And it really was born from the fact that I was immersed in going to schools and seeing how many kids don't have access to many books. And we were finding that there were book deserts. A book desert is defined by an area that has only one book for every 300 kids. So if you imagine all the books, which I imagine are in your home right now, one for every 300. And what I found is that not that there aren't a lot of foundations and literary orgs and education orgs and people giving books, but what I found is often the books that they're giving aren't the ones that reflect the populations that they're serving, or including all the worlds. Like, do I believe that people should see stories that they're in? Yes, but I also believe everyone should be reading all the stories about all the people, And so I always get irritated when people are like, did you give it to that South Asian kid? And I'm like, how about like the white kid or the black kid or whatever? Like, I grew up predominantly ingesting white media, and I liked it. It wasn't like I didn't enjoy what I was watching. Of course I wanted to see myself, but we are connecting to feelings and experiences, and so it's really important that we don't, I think, bifurcate and push people in boxes more than I think the media and landscape already has, which is why our books are for everyone.
Yeah.
And so that foundation, the question you asked me, I got off on a tangent, is really about providing books that for all of the people to these book deserts.
And the one thing that you said, you know, obviously we're talking about, again, reading for everyone. I think that it's really powerful that, for example, you could go to a Chinese immersion school where 99.9% of the kids are Asian, but the library is not reflective of that, right? And that's because, what, publishing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but also I think there is a disconnect between what happens is, it happens in all industries, right? Like, I feel like, I'll speak for myself, when you make the strides that you do, I think there are certainly allies and people that you find, but there is an old guard, like literally an old guard of people who think a certain way and do things a certain way. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations I have with people high up in publishing. We just don't do things that way. And I'm like, well, we're in 2024 and things haven't worked for everyone for a long time, so we do have to change. And so I think the disconnect comes because the people who are putting the money and energy and having the final decision on these things don't necessarily see it the way that they do. I think that's why Joanna mentioned this. It's like you need nuanced stories by lots of different people because we're not a monolith, right? And so often things that are being kind of greenlit or bought are through a white lens that aren't necessarily stories that we want to tell, but it's ones that they're comfortable. It's very much American fiction. If anyone watched that movie, it's very much that.
One thing I would add to that too is like, and sometimes particularly like in the wake of We Need Diverse Books, there has been a much larger like production of really incredible books for our community specifically, but for all communities of color and who've been marginalized historically. But I think what happens is our communities don't know that those books exist. There's a disconnect between the production, and then when the sales don't do well, then the leaders, the typically white male leaders say, oh, well, these books don't sell. I mean, it is a capitalist system despite wanting us to do things for our values and, creating change. And so when they don't sell, then they don't make more. And so I feel like there's also a responsibility for us as a community to continually seek out and support and better understand the landscape of what exists for us in terms of storytelling, because the landscape is growing and it will only continue to grow if we support each other.
But
and
you
something
don't know
that
what you don't know.
I was just going to say, something that everyone can do that is free is literally go to your local library and ask them to have whatever books that you don't see there. And them buying those books, because then the library will buy them and have them, and that's the easiest thing everyone can do.
That's great. It's called a collection development policy. All public libraries have that. You can Google it and your library name and then just fill out a form. I mean, I spend a lot of time doing
free and
that.
easy.
Yes, it's great. Okay, so well, you know what, going back a little bit just on that, what challenges did you have even getting your first book published? Or did you not have?
No, I had.
Who wants to go first?
It was many years. I had started trying to sell my book before that door was opening. And so I think it would have been different if I had tried to sell it at that time. But the amount of, I had someone even ask me, like, how brown do you see her in the book? No one wanted to have the name Anjali as the title character or on the cover of the book. And I was like, guess what? She deserves to be on a cover of a book. People wanted to change. I'm such a collaborator, but there's certain things that need to stay. And so it was really, really hard. I ended up, the bigger publishers that wanted to change it, I said no to, and I ended up going to a smaller publisher so that I could keep the integrity of what I wanted to do.
Wow.
For me, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners was on submission, so that means my agent was submitting it to publishers for almost 2 years, and it was just getting rejected for so many reasons. Some people were saying it's not social justice enough. It doesn't talk in depth about the white supremacist standards of why the beauty standards are the way they are. Some people were saying it's too lyrical, or the parents don't, so many reasons for almost 2 years before it finally sold. And I think it's partially because it's a lyrical, it's a quiet book. And at the time, people are looking for fun books that you want to read at night with your kids. And also it was a topic that had never been done in that way in publishing. And so I think it's scary to do something that's different because you don't know if it will sell.
Yeah.
And then again, it goes back to the community. I mean, they weren't planning to put a lot of publicity behind the book. And the cover reveal went viral online. And because it went viral, they went back to the publisher like, there's a lot of interest in stories like this. And then that's when the publisher started to put more, backing. That's when Target picked up the book. And then it sort of spread. And that was a very grassroots thing that happened because of the community spreading the word about one book in the middle of a pandemic when books were not doing well and when we couldn't promote at all. So I feel tremendously grateful to our community, because I wouldn't be here today but for the ways that my career and my stories and our stories in general have been supported by everyone.
And I just want to add, I think what Joanna says is such a good point in the sense of the community had to prove it in order to get what she should have had from the beginning. Because what happens is, say the buyers of Target or even the departments at our publishers are made up by a certain type of person, and they connect to certain stories for their own personal reasons, right? And so they put their energy and time into stories that they connect to. Not their fault, but they might not understand what we're trying to do because they don't understand it, because they're just not like us. And so that's the problem. We shouldn't have had to do that, but thankfully they saw that. And
But I will say, it is so powerful. And if, for parents out there, you understand when you read a book to your child and they connect with it, it is, it's priceless. And the first time I did that was with a book by Karen Chan. She has glue books, and she sent me a book called What's That? And my son actually said, that's me. Aww. And he was 2.5, 3. And I've bought that kid 100 books, And for him to really say that at that young of an age, it is so powerful. We did not have that growing up. I'm wondering what you think, what stories are next? What are we missing? Because we're kind of in this space where we are healing our own traumas, and the things that we didn't get. But our kids are going to have different experiences than us, and they're going to be, even more multiracial, more multi-ethnic. What stories are we missing now?
There's still so many.
So many,
There's so many.
Getting started. We need all the stories for all of us so that we can see all the possibilities of who we are. But I think for me, something I think about is, for me currently, it's been thinking about how we shift and dismantle and reimagine oppressive systems. But what I would love to shift into is how we live and imagine and tell stories that are joyful and full of light and love, and so that we are creating stories as if we're already in the world that we are trying to create. Because it's really hard for us, I think, when we think about that world, it's hard for us to speak in positive terms. It's always, there won't be racism, we won't have to hide parts of who we are, but what does it sound like for us to speak as if we're already doing those things, we're already in that space, we are already whole, and we feel whole, and what does it feel like to tell stories from a space of joy instead of a space of healing trauma?
Yeah, I so echo that. And it comes to the fact of why don't we get to write stories about a kid digging a worm? Yeah. We don't get to do that right now, we try. By the way, I have a book about that. But everyone's like, where's the Indian part of that? And I'm like, guess what? We also dig worms, you know what I mean? And so it is hard, you want to be able to write all the things, and nobody else gets asked this question, It's just interesting. I was just filming a movie, and I was on the set, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it was interesting because I do speak other languages, but the director asked me and assumed I did, and asked me if I could throw in some of a language, which I didn't speak, but he assumed I did, and I spoke another one, and it was just interesting. I was thinking to myself, I don't know how many white actors are asked to do that. I'm supposed to have a lot of skills. Yeah. It's not like my part was anywhere written in that context, but to be asked that on top of what I was already doing, I could do it, but it was interesting that I'm asked to do things
implied.
Yeah.
We're almost out of time, so I just want you to share with people how they can support you or what's coming up next. Just some lasting thoughts.
I have 2 new books coming out. I have a book coming out in July called Rashi's Rockies, and it's my reimagining, if anyone knows this festival called Raksha Bandhan. It's a very popular South Asian festival, and I find it to be really patriarchal. It's my twist on it about this little girl who realizes it's very inequitable, and she changes it so it works for her. And it was very much based on my own life of me having 2 daughters and being why can't we change our traditions so that it works with the values we have? And so that is coming out in July. The 3rd Anjali book is finally coming out next spring, and this crowd will love it because it's all about how she activates her community to get behind a worthy cause. And I have books and other things that are in process right now. But to me, honestly, the best way to support me that's easy is share the stories, talk about them. Like I said, go to your libraries, ask for them. If you go to a bookstore and you don't see it, you don't have to buy it, but you can ask them to get it, and they'll have it there, and someone else will buy it if you don't want it. One of my favorite things to do, because I give books for all of my kids' birthday parties, is like the giveaway, because they can hold on to it. All the books I like in my closet, I have just like 10 copies of all of them, and I just constantly give them as presents. So if you're gonna give a present, a book is always a good thing. So those are just little things to think about.
Love that. I would love if people would share and buy and read this book. I would feel really, really proud of We Who Produce Pearls. In terms of what I have next, I have like a silly holiday book coming out. I have a book next year called Becoming Boba. It's about boba. So it's more deeply about what it means to be Asian enough or milk tea enough in the context of. And I have to shout out Andrew Chow, because I interviewed him, and I feel like understanding like what boba means in the community was really helpful in shaping this story. I think, and I have like 2 or 3 books out every year for the next few years. So I think for me, it's more just about uplifting all of our stories. So yes, please buy our books, but please also like look up other Asian authors, shout out their books, share their stories. There are so many of us out here telling stories for kids, people of all ages. Kids' books are also for people of all ages. I also think please pay attention to book banning. It's happening around you for sure. And if you don't know and you don't show up and speak out, this small, tiny minority of people is really intentionally controlling and silencing a narrative that we are just working so hard to make visible.
Really hyper-local news in that case, because they're the ones covering those school board meetings. Also, did you guys see this, Fighting to Belong? This is so awesome. You're gonna get a copy, maybe, I think if they're still out there, but this is by Third State Books and TAAF. This is an amazing graphic novel that is out now, so you can also ask for this book at your library or your schools, but it's so amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much.
Thank you.